part 2 where we left off with cooldown usage, and I'm just going to give a quick rundown of the cooldowns and basically how you're going to use them. First, we've got Bloodbath and Dragon Roar. Now these are the cooldowns you're going to get from talents. There's other ones you can pick from talents, but these are the ones we picked from the first video, so I'm just going to talk about how to use them. And that is going to be essentially on cooldown in tandem. And in tandem just means like I'm going to use my Bloodbath a split second before I use Dragon Roar, so I get the Bloodbath for the Dragon Roar. And you're going to do that because Bloodbath is off of the global cooldown and they've got the same cooldown. So you should just be able to boom boom, just hit them both right that, and that'll put the bleed from the Dragon Roar and the Bloodbath on everything. So like if there's AoE, I hit Bloodbath, then Dragon Roar, everything gets hit with the Dragon Roar, and they're bleeding for the extra damage from your Bloodbath. Also with Dragon Roar, it's important to note that you don't necessarily want to use it with Colossus Smash because it already ignores armor. And with Bloodbath, it causes your melee special attacks to deal additional 30% damage bleed. And that also does include your heroic strikes. So pretty much the best time to use your Bloodbath Dragon Roar combination is right before a Colossus Smash. And that should always line up because this is a 1 minute and Colossus Smash is a 20-second. So before every third Colossus Smash, you should be putting a Bloodbath Dragon Roar combination. And that's good because we're stocking up that rage for that Colossus Smash anyway, and Bloodbath and Dragon Roar helps with that because they don't cost any rage. So we hit our Bloodthirst, our Colossus Smash with Bloodbath up, and then when we hit all those heroic strikes in there, along with your normal abilities, you're getting that extra bleed damage from those heroic strikes as well. They're off the global cooldown. Next one is Berserker Rage. We already talked a little bit about Berserker Rage because Berserker Rage kind of walks the line between your regular rotation and your cooldowns. And what Berserker Rage does, it just gives you an Enrage, which is what we normally get when we crit with our Bloodthirst and our Colossus Smash. And that's extremely important for us Fury Warriors because that interacts with our Mastery. And that just takes our normal 10% damage increase we get from being enraged and boosts it, depending on how high your Mastery is. Also, gaining Enrages is what gives us our Raging Blow, which is our hardest hitting ability. So it's pretty useful in both of those ways, both for the extra damage from your Mastery and the extra Raging Blow you can get in there. But when do we really want to use it? Now, this was demonstrated kind of in the first video, so if you haven't watched part 1, I don't know why you're on part 2 and haven't watched part 1, but I highly recommend you watch part 1, especially where I do the DPS rotation, because I do run into this situation where I've hit Bloodthirst and Colossus Smash, and neither one of them crit, so I don't have an Enrage. Now I've got the Ignore Armor going from Colossus Smash, which is a big damage increase, and if I really want to take advantage of that, I need to be Enraged. So that's when you want to use your Berserker Rage. Not only to follow up that Colossus Smash with a Raging Blow that'll hit for a ton of damage, but to have the Enrage for all the other attacks that you have that go off during that Colossus Smash. Even your White Swings, of course, their physical damage, they suffer from your armor, so having Berserker Rage up there will help you get a lot more damage. It'll get you the most out of your Colossus Smash, and you can use it pretty liberally too. It's only 30-second cooldown. I only recommend using it in that situation because it's really a bummer when you get into that situation. You hit your Bloodthirst, you hit your Colossus Smash, you don't have a Raging Blow, and you're not enraged, and Berserker Rage is on cooldown, and that's usually where you're going to have to sit a global cooldown, which is where you just don't use anything, which is bad. Next cooldowns we want to look are our offensive cooldowns, our big ones, our 3 minutes, and that's our Recklessness and our Skull Banner. Recklessness just lets our special attacks have an additional 30% chance to crit, and that lasts 12 seconds. Now that's really important, especially for your opener when all your stuff is going. You've got that. All your raid is probably using cooldowns like Bloodlust if you're Bloodlusting off the top. A lot of fights that's best on. You just used your potion. You just probably have all your procs going. So there's a lot of things going on there. You probably have other, just stuff is happening. That's when the most damage is going out. You hit that Recklessness, so all your stuff crits, as well as your Bloodthirst and your Colossus Smash are more likely to crit there, giving you more Raging Blows for that time. And of course, in turn, more Raging Blows means you're spending less rage in your rotation, which means you've got more room for heroic strikes, which also will crit. So, which means you've got Bloodbath up, so that's even more bleed damage. So, Recklessness is really, really important to your burst, and you pretty much want to use it on cooldown. Now, Skull Banner, if you're the only warrior, you can pretty much just macro it to Recklessness. You'll have a little bit of lost benefit in there from if you like Dragon Roar at weird times, just because Dragon Roar, it always crits anyway, so having Skull Banner is really good because it's just 20% more Dragon Roar damage. But Recklessness is worthless for it because it already crits, so you're just wasting a Recklessness global cooldown with that Dragon Roar. So ideally, Skull Banner, Dragon Roar with your Bloodbath on, then Recklessness. If you macro them together, like, it's a lot more simplicity, and you're really not losing a whole bunch of damage for that. However, if you're not the only warrior in your raid, you almost definitely want to have your Recklessness and Skull Banner separate, and that's just because Skull Banner isn't just for you. It's 20% extra crit damage, but it's for everyone in your raid. So this means if you've got 2 Fury Warriors and a Prot Warrior tank, and you all charge in there and you're doing your burst, and all 3 of you throw down your Skull Banner, when you could have had like a full 30 seconds of 20% extra crit, you instead now have 10 seconds of extra crit. So you want to kind of coordinate that. Now I have a thing for my warriors here where I'll drop my banner, and it actually says it has a thing in chat that'll say a banner is down, and I'll get this weak auras thing here in the corner that shows me that there is a banner down, and that works for any banner. So I know that if I see that symbol, I should not throw my banner down because someone already has theirs going. That's pretty much all of our offensive cooldowns. Let's talk about some of our defensive cooldowns. Now you're probably wondering, well, this is Fury Warrior, we gotta do maximum damage, so defensive cooldowns, who cares? Defensive cooldowns are very, very important. I mean, there's the never-ending mantra of dead DPS is no DPS, and there's just a lot of situations where you can easily prevent a death by using one of your cooldowns. The biggest one, I would say, is Die by the Sword. Now, warriors have been complaining forever about not having a threat drop. I mean, rogues have their Vanish, mages have Invis, there's just priests have Fade, warlocks have Soul Shatter. Like, all these other DPS classes have their aggro reducers or aggro drops. Warriors, we don't have that. We still have Heavy Burst. Usually, if your tank is good and they get that big hit in there with all their vengeance, you should never ever have to worry about pulling anything off of them. But in situations with ads and stuff like that, or something doesn't get picked up quick enough and you need to be on it and DPSing it right away because there's timers to worry about, even if you get there like before the tank, obviously will get you a melee swing, and one melee swing can kill you in a lot of situations. So instead of having a threat drop, we've got this little deal, Die by the Sword, which as long as the thing is using melee attacks, you can't die for 8 full seconds. And that gives your tank plenty of time to taunt it off of you and get some threat. So that's pretty much how Die by the Sword can be used. Now, in other situations, if that you're not going to be in a situation where you're going to need it for that, so there's a bunch of raid AoE damage, this is a good personal cooldown for you because it does reduce all damage taken by 20% as well as increase your parry chance by 100%. So it's a good defensive cooldown in both situations, and can also be used kind of like an aggro drop. I mean, it doesn't really make sense for the warrior class, the big up and get 'em warrior class, to have a true aggro dump. But that's kind of the closest thing we're going to get is Die by the Sword. And I like it. I'm okay with it. Actually, I'm more than okay with it because you don't have to stop damaging. You can hit Die by the Sword and keep hitting the thing. It doesn't matter how hard you hit it. Once that shield slam crits goes down on the boss, you're not getting it back. Now we've got some good raid utility cooldowns. Rallying Cry gives everyone more health. Simple enough. It's like a mini Last Stand, but for everyone in your group. Of course, if multiple warriors, these don't stack, so you're going to want to spread those out. These are really good on situations like Magira, where you've got all these, the rampage going on, you're taking tons of damage, and 20% extra health gives your healers a nice little buffer there, so they don't let anyone go. And we've also got our Demoralizing Banner, which just reduces the damage that everything does by 10%, so another damage reduction. That can be used in a lot of the same situations. You can throw down that Demoralizing Banner. So those are two really good ones. If you're in a lot of trouble, they got the same cooldown. You can throw them down together. So a lot of good utility there as far as survivability. And these are also all not on the global cooldown. So there's really no reason not to use them. It doesn't cost any rage. It's not on the global. You can just throw down a Rallying Cry whenever. Let's talk real quick about when to not use and what situations to look for your offensive and defensive cooldowns. And we already kind of talked about defensive cooldowns, big raid damage situations. And a lot of times, when to use those is going to be dictated by your raid's healers, because they're the ones that know when stuff is going to be, they're going to need to be using that stuff. And they usually have a lot of their own cooldowns to keep the raid alive, so you don't want to stack it with those. So pretty much you need to ask your healers and find out when to use Rallying Cry, when to use Demoralizing Banner. Die by a Sword is pretty much the only one that you're just going to use it when you need it. Now for your offensive cooldowns, like I said, top of the fight, most situations, best time to use them. And there are situations where it's not. So if there are a few phases to look for that. So you've got what I call burn phases, and this is just times where either you have a significant amount of time on the boss where you don't have to worry about anything else, the boss is taking additional damage, various things like those. And those are the times that you want to wait to use your cooldowns. And then there's also air phases. It doesn't necessarily mean it's in the air, I guess. It's just, you know, sort of a reference to Anexia, where she'd take off in the air. So there's other bosses where they just become unattackable to melee for a period of time. You want to make sure that you're not going to use any of your cooldowns before that happens, or while that's happening, obviously. Because you're not going to get the full usage out of them. You want to make sure you get the full use of your cooldowns. And that all really just comes down to knowing the fight. Knowing what happens, as well as knowing the length of a fight. So if a fight is 4 minutes long, then you'll know that I can use my cooldowns at the start, which is the best time to use them. And then the next best time to use them, possibly the best time to use them actually, is at the end of the fight when you have execute going, because you're going to be doing a ton of damage with your execute. So you want to, if it's a 4-minute fight, you're going to use them at the start, assuming that there's no specific time you want to use it, and then 3 minutes in they're going to come off a cooldown. You're going to wait for a while until you are in that execute phase, if you're not quite to it yet. On those cooldowns, because you're only going to get to use them twice anyway. So you want to use it, you don't want to use it and then after they're done, then the boss hits 20% and then your execute phase starts. So it's better off in that situation to hold on to those cooldowns and then use them during execute. Another big raid cooldown you've got is Shattering Throw. Shattering Throw is kind of a bummer. It's really good, like it does damage and reduces their armor by 20%, and that's in addition to Sunders, and so you know that's a really good cooldown. There's a lot of extra damage. I think it actually with Colossus Smash ends up putting things into I think it's one of the few things that'll put things into negative armor, giving you bonus damage against them. I'm not 100% sure that that's true, but regardless, it's a big cooldown for you and for everyone else hitting the boss. But for the warrior who's casting it, it's kind of a bummer. It's a 1.5 second cast. That's a full, global, but it pauses your melee swing and actually resets it once after you've cast it. So you'll lose a lot of damage. I mean, a lot of our damage comes from the white swings, so there's that, and it costs 25 rage to boot. And the best way to use Shattering Throw, I would say, is to be clever with it. If you're amazing and the boss is at like 21%, you can time the Shattering Throw so it hits right as the boss hits 20 and you have all this rage stocked up, and then you hit your CS and you spam like a gazillion executes on it with all your cooldowns going. That would be the best time to use it if your timing is amazing. Also, if something is in an air phase where the range can shoot it but you can't, so you're kind of throwing your heroic throw and maybe spamming, I don't know, throw at it like it's like all we've got. But if it's about, you're not doing much damage there anyway, so if it's about to land and you have enough rage to use it, you can channel that Shattering Throw and have it hit right as the thing lands and then do all your damage without actually wasting the time spent to channel the darn thing. Also, if you're in a weird raid situation where you're the only physical DPS, I'm not sure if that is wise, but say you're in a group with nothing but mages and warlocks, in that case I would just, unless you're in a situation where you can use Shattering Throw without a penalty, I just wouldn't use it at all, because to you personally it's really not a DPS gain. Alright, now that we've beat cooldowns to death, let's talk about a couple of special situations. And of course I'm talking about things like AoE and your execute phase. Now first let's start with our AoE. So multiple targets. Now this will change. This will change based on how many targets you're fighting. But the basic idea is you keep your normal rotation going. You hit your Bloodthirst and your Colossus Smash when you can. Then you're going to fit in, when you're not using Raging Blow, you're going to fit in Whirlwinds instead of, normally be Wild Strikes. So just as many Whirlwinds as you can instead of fillers as well. Then you're going to stack up as many stacks of Meat Cleaver as there are additional targets. So if we just whirl, we got 4 targets here. So a Whirlwind up to 3. So we have my main target and then 3 extras. And then we hit our Raging Blow. And it should hit all of them, which it did there. So we've got 8 hits. There's 4 targets, 2 hits on each target. One with your main hand, one with your offhand. So that's just how Meat Cleaver works. So if you're only hitting 2 targets, you're going to Whirlwind, and then you're going to Raging Blow after that. And ideally, just keep that going. If you've got a Raging Blow proc and you don't have enough stacks of Whirlwind, just keep stacking your Whirlwind until you get to the point that you want to use your Raging Blow at anyway. If there's more than 4, obviously just stack it to 3 and then use your Raging Blow then. And the reason it's okay to do that, to hold on to that proc even if the Raging Blow, even if you're gonna waste one, is because if there's that many targets, you're getting a ton of damage from Whirlwind anyway. So I'm looking at like 200k here unbuffed, like Whirlwinds. So I mean, you're getting a ton from the Raging Blow, but if you only have 1 target, it's not even doing more than 1 Whirlwind hit anyway. Also, if by some miracle you have enough extra rage to use where you'd normally be using a Heroic Strike, go ahead and replace that with a Cleave. I've never run into this situation. Like, you're usually just not Whirlwinding enough if you've got enough rage to use a Cleave, unless maybe you're in Berserker stance and you're taking damage while you're AoEing things down. In that case, then I guess you could use a Cleave, but Cleave is pretty much out. Like, yeah, there's not enough rage for it, and it doesn't hit anywhere near as hard as a Whirlwind does for the same amount of rage. So even here, like 2 targets on my Whirlwind. Let's hit that. So I hit a 3rd one in there. There we go. So that's like 94k to its 2 crits. It's a basic looking one. There's a 1 crit 1 hit, so it's like not even close to as much damage with a Cleave for the same amount of rage. And you should be able, since you're like spamming Whirlwind, you should be able to dump it all off onto that without having to worry about Cleave. But yeah, again, Cleave if you miraculously get that much rage. Another thing you can do, and I guess this is kind of part of the rotation I talked about a little bit, if you're DPSing the boss from behind and you can Heroic Leap kind of around its hitbox, you can get some extra DPS in there. You definitely want a Heroic Leap on cooldown while AoEing, just because it does hit everything, and it does hit quite hard for something that's off the global cooldown and doesn't cost any rage. It's definitely, I mean, if you want to get fancy, you can use it single target, but I would say it's definitely something you want to be doing while you're AoEing, absolutely. And I obviously don't need to tell you why it's good to hold a Bloodbath Berserker Rage combo, or a Bloodbath Dragon Roar combo for your AoE, because it's just ridiculous. Like, yeah. Alright, so for the execute phase, if you want to practice it, up in Ice Crown, where the Trial of the Crusader was, the Argent tournament, I don't even know how it's, the tournament grounds, there are dummies here that will actually lose health, and so you can open up your execute on them. Now, they are only level 80, so you're going to get highly inaccurate DPS, like, numbers. Don't, like, use it as an accurate representation of how much damage you're going to do in your execute phase, but it will let you practice your execute phase if you want to practice it. And essentially, in the execute phase, you're doing everything you can to filter as much of your rage into execute, because it is damage per rage wise, unless you count Bloodthirst that gives you rage, is your highest ability. Like, I think it's actually really close to Raging Blow. Raging Blow might even be more. You're still going to be using Raging Blow, but most of it's going to be going to Execute. So you're pretty much just going to Bloodthirst, still use Colossus Smash when you can, and then if you've got the Rage to Execute, Execute. And if you don't have the Rage to Execute, but you've got the 10, because it costs 30, so if you've got the 10 for a Raging Blow, you can put a Raging Blow in there. You pretty much don't want to be using Rage on anything other than Execute. Raging Blow is just really cheap, so you can fit one in there if you have a global. If you've got like 20 Rage, so you can't Execute, but you can Raging Blow. It's good. It's better to use that than it is to waste the global. Bloodthirst gives you Rage, so you're going to want to use that. You're still going to want to use Bloodbath and Dragon Roar because they don't cost Rage. If you get a Blood Surge proc now, you can use your Wild Strikes because those are now free. You're never going to want to use a regular Wild Strike, obviously, because it costs the same Rage as an Execute, and Execute does way more damage. So Bloodthirst, Colossus Smash, Execute, Wild Strikes if you have Blood Surge proc, and Raging Blows to fill open global cooldowns if you don't have Execute. Now you still want to hit Bloodthirst every single time on cooldown, except for this is the one situation where you won't. So if we have high Rage here, let's get some high Rage here, and we hit our Bloodthirst Colossus Smash combination, and you can fit 4 globals into that. So if we can fit 4 Executes, now normally our Bloodthirst would come off a cooldown during that, but since you can, if you have enough Rage to fit 4 Executes in a row, go ahead and do that. So it's your 4 Executes with all your cooldowns up, and then go right back into your regular sort of deal there. And you still actually kind of want to Rage pool here if you have a Colossus Smash, so I'm kind of still feeding like 1 Raging Blow and 1 Execute in there until I've got my Colossus Smash back, so now I've got enough Rage stocked up. And you can just use Berserker Rage whenever, since you're not really using it for Raging Blow procs anymore. So sort of being a little conservative. Let's go ahead and use my Blood Surge proc since I'm low Rage anyway. Oop, I accidentally just used one. It wore off right in the middle. And then back to Executes. Now, I was off of CS there, so I just kind of used an Execute. Yeah, I used my Bloodthirst over Execute there. So yeah, and just, you know, you can come out here to the fairgrounds and practice that. Speaking of practice and experience, that's what you're going to need to be good at Fury. Watching this video and following everything that I talked about, you maybe know about, if you're really paying attention, 40% of what it takes to be a good Fury player. Maybe even 60% if I want to toot my own horn, I guess there. But a lot of it's just going to take practice. I mean, Fury is very much a feel spec, and the reason for that is because of our Rage generation is off of White Swings. And I guess I'm capped against this thing because it's only level 80, but you can't get enough hit to cap out your White Swings, and even if you did, you'd have so much taken out of crit, you'd end up doing way less damage. So your Rage income isn't static. Your income for resources. So you really have to get a feel for how to handle your Rage, and it's going to change. You're going to get better gear. If you're going to get more over hit cap, you're going to get more. You're going to have more Rage because you're going to get more Bloodthirst crits and spending more globals on Raging Blow instead of Wild Strikes. So depending on your gear, you're going to have different Rage incomes as well. So knowing how to deal with that, knowing how to deal with the same situation with a lot of Rage and the same situation with not as much Rage properly, is going to take a lot of practice and a lot of feel to get good at, and it's even going to change on a fight-by-fight basis. So it just takes a lot of work to be good at Fury. Fury is not a spec for the faint of heart, I would say. Even by Warcraft standards. I mean, there is really no easy DPS class. Some people will say mages, but if you want to be a good mage, like really good, there's a lot of work to do even there. So, you know, and Fury is probably, I would put it at the top of that list, but that's as far as difficulty goes, but I haven't played every spec. So, but we are really the only ones whose resource is that irregular. I mean, rogues and things have regular resources because they can get things that give them extra combo points, and I think there's procs that give them extra energy back as well. But it's not quite to the extent that the rage management is with Fury, and that's just going to be a lot of time in front of target dummies practicing, and a lot of time in raids trying to master how to handle those things. If you really want to keep up with all that Fury stuff, I highly recommend subscribing to my channel. I will be bringing back the Fury Raider series. Probably going to be much more simplified. It's not going to be raid guides. I have friends at Fat Boss and Tank Spot that do that sort of thing. So mine will be usually just quick rundowns on fights of specific things you as a Fury Warrior or an Arms Warrior can do on that fight in order to really maximize. As well as probably bring back a few rage talks where I'll talk about some of these finite situations and just sort of maybe theory and philosophy on playing a Fury Warrior. So the other 40% of the things that you didn't learn here, some of that might be in those rage talks, so I recommend watching those as well. Thanks again for watching my guide, and I hope you learned a lot about how to play a Fury Warrior. If you want to get a hold of me, sending me a message here on YouTube is a good idea. Also, I have the Rage Mail at warrior.torage@gmail.com, or even send me an in-game mail. I'm Torage on Feathermoon server, US, and I am also Arkaroth on Airy Peak server, US, Alliance side. And Torage is obviously Horde side.